Welcome to Cooperative Vermont. I'm Matt Kropp.
And I'm Eric Davis.
And we're coming to you live this Sunday, January 26th, 2014, first show of the new year. And we've got some pretty exciting news that's kind of getting folks caught up on a lot of co-op movement news that's happened. And particularly we'll be talking about a meeting that happened yesterday that's some big news for the kind of cross-sector project that is Cooperative Vermont. And then we'll be following that up with an interview. Caitlin Quigley will be calling in from the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance, which is another initiative that we've been following that is a bit further along in the sort of cross-sector collaboration than we are. So I think there's going to be some really interesting lessons to learn from that conversation. Mm-hmm. But first, the news.
Yeah, well, it's been a little while since we've been together, and it's good to see you again, Matt.
Yeah,
to be talking about co-ops. It's good stuff. So I think first up is really exciting project from down in Massachusetts, from out of the University of Massachusetts. Urban Crawl, who's sort of a driving force behind Neighboring Food Co-op Association, is starting a course there, Introduction to Cooperatives, and we've
in the econ department, no less.
Beautiful. The University of Massachusetts is a good place for as far as econ departments go, mm-hmm. as we can see, and there's just such a need for that sort of program. It's really exciting to see that happen.
Yeah, Urban, in addition to his work with the Neighboring Food Co-ops Association, he's also done. He participated in the St. Mary's Masters of Cooperatives and Credit Unions, and his thesis, which is really interesting, is all about co-op-led development in the context of the Valley Alliance of Worker Co-ops down in the Connecticut River Valley, which I think is, it's a really interesting sort of way of thinking, kind of putting co-ops themselves at the center of the development process. So he's got some pretty deep insights into the cooperative model, and I'm hoping to be able to see the syllabus that he uses, just because I think a lot of other organizations or like universities and things should be replicating what he's doing.
Oh, absolutely. It's there is the program at St. Mary's. There hasn't been a lot in the U.S., and if you look at what cooperatives contribute to the economy in the U.S., it's just huge mm-hmm. contribution. So it's to be left out of the conversation in a lot of academia. There's dire need there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's supposedly like 150 students and it's a full course. Wow. So it's great. Like if he can do it there, then there might be space for that to happen in other places too. So we'll definitely be keeping our eyes on how that goes, and if there are opportunities here in Vermont to kind of replicate that sort of educational opportunity. But another piece of news, the Vermont State Employees Credit Union. This is, I think, the second or third year they're doing it. It's a sort of democratic community giving program called the We Care To program. And the way they're running it is they have a committee of members that have picked 5 worthy nonprofit organizations and they're allowing the members to vote, and the top 2 vote getters will each get a $10,000 donation. So it's sort of a interesting little sort of experiment in more direct member democratic participation in the credit union.
That's so cool. Love that program. The first principle is democratic member control. So mm-hmm. In an environment where that's more accessible with technology and it's cool to see institutions opening that up mm-hmm.
And
looking for avenues where they can bring in member input more directly.
Yeah, and those co-op principles are something that it's a fairly philosophical thing, and so it can be interpreted broadly. And a lot of co-ops, I think, seem to unfortunately take a more minimalist view of what it means to kind of fulfill that principle. To say, okay, well, we have a board that the member could run for if they want to, and that's all that needs to happen. Whereas kind of actively looking for new spaces in which members can be empowered is really, I think, rather than a shallow, a more deep appreciation of that principle.
And we were talking about before we came on, an exciting expansion in the food co-op arena.
Mm-hmm.
The Putney Food Co-op expanding on the Food for All program, in which members who may be on some sort of assistance program get even further discounted prices at the co-op. And it's a great program. I think, food co-ops are always sort of fighting this image of the co-op as a place for sort of well-to-do folks to go buy all the granola that they would like to buy. So, and really the reality is that food co-ops offer really competitive pricing on a lot of staple type items. So anything around sort of increasing people's access to food co-ops rather than the corporate, your corporate grocery store, I think is just fantastic. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, City Market in Burlington has been doing this for a number of years. So they give 10% off to anyone who is either on food stamps or qualifies for Social Security disability. So basically any sort of assistance then saying, okay, well, you get 10% off your grocery bill, which I think is a pretty solid step in the direction of making that sort of food accessible to people who are kind of normally marginalized by the food system. Another piece of upcoming news is that you as a board member of Vermont Federal are up for re-election. The annual meeting was announced. It's happening on Thursday, April 17th at 5:30. So anyone out there who's a member of Vermont Federal and want to eat some hors d'oeuvres and participate in some democracy, there's a fine candidate sitting right next to me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to potentially have the opportunity to serve the membership of Vermont Federal. Again, I've thoroughly enjoyed my time on the board to this point, and looking forward to opening that, to seeing how members would like to move the organization forward, because democracy isn't a convenience; it's a must. So really excited to participate in that process.
And it's going to be a competitive election. Three folks for 2 seats, and voting will again only be at the annual meeting, or is there going to be absentee voting this year? Do you know?
No, voting will be only at the annual meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're out there and then a member of Vermont Federal, time to do some democracy coming up real soon.
April 17th.
So then, kind of also on the credit union front, the Association of Vermont Credit Unions seems to be getting into the media game, the co-op media landscape, and Joe Bergeron, the head of that organization, has just started a new show.
Yeah, it's I spoke to him yesterday about this, and I think the thinking is that he really wants to capture. There's some folks that are potentially leaving the credit union industry, and he wants to really capture the knowledge base that's there. And I know you've had a chance to watch the episode. What were your thoughts?
It was about 20 minutes, and sat down with the head of the one credit union in southern Vermont, which is kind of a smaller to mid-sized credit union. It was really interesting to hear because he's one of those credit union heads who came from the sort of field of membership, the kind of employee group, and then had some banking experience before, like working as a teller, and so got involved in the credit union because of that, and then that eventually, So he comes from the sort of old style of like a credit union leader who's kind of a member of the credit union community first and sort of a professional second. So they had probably one of the most interesting pieces, and you can go on the Facebook page and find a link to the video.
Right.
But really interesting piece, sort of talking about that transition from people kind of coming from leaders growing out of the community of the credit union, and how to sort of keep up the cooperative values with more professionalized staff and things like that. So I thought that was a really important conversation to be having, and I was glad that Joe thought that was something that was worth bringing up in the context of this interview.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic with the increasing professionalization in the credit union movement. it certainly grew organically, and it dovetails sort of with that cooperative education point off the top that it's really sort of critical to get people thinking about co-ops, as a career choice, from the beginning.
Yeah, so I'm definitely looking forward to more episodes, and if we have any slow news days, we can always throw a few up on future episodes of Cooperative Vermont. But some more credit union news. This on the sort of negative side. A few months ago, word had come out that regulators had shut down Border Lodge Credit Union, which was a small, around $3 million in assets credit union in the Northeast Kingdom. And new details have emerged. There's an article somewhat recently in Credit Union Times that mentioned that that gave some details. The head, her name was Deborah Kinney, had embezzled some money, and so she will be sentenced in Burlington on the 14th of April. So this is one of those things where it's like, well, even though most people who are involved in the credit union movement are doing things, and co-ops are doing things for the right reasons, it's always important to kind of just double check things, make sure that we're on our guard against people who will behave in a predatory way towards our movement. And so I'll definitely be going to the court hearing. I don't know if video recording is allowed actually in the courtroom, but at very least I'm going to go and just kind of see and report back on kind of what the process looks like.
That would be interesting. I believe in a federal courtroom there is not video recording allowed, but
seems pretty anachronistic.
Sure, right? Transparency.
If you can go there in person,
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I think this was definitely one of the smaller credit unions in Vermont. Potentially was it the smallest?
No, it wasn't the smallest.
Okay.
The smallest is I think a Catholic church parish credit union that's up near St. Albans in one of the small towns, kind of to the east of St. A.
And when this news came out last year, I think everyone sort of thought something along these lines, maybe, because it happened rather quickly, and it's unfortunate to sort of see that confirmed recently with the charges, and so, yeah, it is important to call that out, though, for sure.
And another credit union related thing is a project that's coming up for me soon. I am quitting my day job in a few weeks, and the first project I'm going to undertake in whatever this ephemeral new path I'm taking will be is I'm going to be doing an oral history project through the South, where I'm flying down to New Orleans, buying a USA Rail Pass, which means in 15 days I can do 8 legs, and then going to get on and off the train, kind of going from New Orleans through the South, interviewing elderly African American credit unionists, and I'll definitely be showing some highlights when I get back on the show. But I'll also be posting the full interviews to the Cooperative Vermont YouTube channel, so that there should be a collection of hopefully some pretty interesting insights and thoughts. And I did a little bit of research. I've been doing a little bit of research trying to find what I can about African American credit unionism before I go.
Yeah.
But the resources are pretty sparse on the ground. But I did on Martin Luther King Day. I did dig up a bit of information about the kind of some connections between the civil rights movement and credit unions, specifically in terms of the Montgomery bus boycott, and the organization that emerged from there had applied for and was denied twice federal credit union charters in the late 1950s, which was kind of an interesting little thing because supposedly they didn't grant charters to civic organizations. I would be very curious to see the original sort of letters and documents. That would be fun to find. But
yeah,
it's going to be a couple of weeks, and I think it's going to learn quite a lot.
That's so cool. I very much enjoyed reading that piece on Martin Luther King Day about Martin Luther King as a credit unionist. It's not always sort of what you hear about Martin Luther King, but thank you for uncovering that. And the link to that article is on our Facebook page as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's on my credit union history blog, so cuhistory.blogspot.com if you want to check it out.
I'm really psyched to follow your trip along the way with the uploads, as they come in. What sort of brought this idea about for you?
It was somewhat serendipitous. I'd recognized that there was a hole in sort of most of the credit union history that has been written, which is not all that much, has primarily focused on the most visible institutions, because those are the ones that have made the most easily accessible documents, really. And so, like, just in general with history, marginalized groups tend to have their stories told less.
Sure.
I'd also heard a little bit about a connection with the civil rights movement. And so it was something I was kind of interested in. And then Allison, my partner, for her February break, was thinking about the idea of taking a little vacation down to New Orleans. And so I was thinking, okay, well, I was kind of getting ready to end my current job. And I was like, okay, that's a good sort of good time to do it. And I'll be in New Orleans. I was thinking about what could I do? What would be a good way of kind of kicking off this next phase? And I was like, I love doing history stuff. So that kind of started with that, and then started thinking out what I could do. And the idea I think it was like one commute. So like when I was driving to Barrie, I was just mulling this idea over, and by the end of the drive, I was like, that's what I'm doing. So
that's so cool. And one thing I sort of be particularly interested about is, credit unions were typically organized around churches and employee groups, and at least in much of the country, we've typically moved away from that. I wonder if that connection isn't stronger, sort of in the South. So that's something I'd
one thing I have, I've been starting to find sources, and I've gotten in touch with a few different groups and a few different credit unions already. And one that I found particularly interesting, I had really interesting email exchange with someone from a Black Catholic credit union outside of Washington, D.C., near in Arlington, just right across the river.
Right. And
sort of the fellow made the point that that in terms of like newly formed credit unions, from his experience, like, given that most of the credit union movement has been consolidating, one of the few places that you do see any number of like newly formed credit unions is within sort of the Black church community. Huh. And there's a short book that there's a review of up on CU History called The Black Church Credit Union, that was written in the late 80s or like maybe 1990, actually as a guy who was doing his PhD in divinity, but his project was kind of about sort of financial education and a credit union in a Black church parish, and kind of framing it in terms of Black theology and number of other things. It's a short book, but it was very interesting to read, and I think that the Black church as an institution was, especially in the segregated South, was kind of a bedrock of both like social life and social solidarity, and so I think it was natural to see the credit union as kind of this economic extension of that community.
Absolutely. Well, I'm not sure what you'll find, but I am sure that it's going to be very exciting. I'm looking forward to
super stoked for this.
Yeah. That's so cool. So excited you're doing that.
But speaking of things that are
very cool,
being super stoked about.
So we along with about 20 other folks yesterday, I'd say, had a really fantastic meeting at the Association of Vermont Credit Unions. Hosted the meeting, and it was really, really exciting to. There was definitely critical mass there, and folks that I didn't really know before that. I was really excited to see some, talk to some new people. And the topic was, Cooperative Vermont. What is into the future? What is Cooperative Vermont? And what were your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it was a really encouraging meeting. We had come together, and really this project that you and I have been working on has been something where we've been building these connections to all these different people in different sections of the cooperative movement, and building the social media presence and getting sort of all of those kind of networks together. And so this meeting really felt like the culmination of all of that work, because it was this really, I felt like the group that had representation in all these different sectors. It was at the Association of Vermont Credit Unions, and Joe Bergeron was there. There was a representative from Cabot there. There was few people who are involved in worker co-ops. There's Avram Pat, who's has heavily been, just retired from the electric co-op movement and is still very active as a consultant. Julia Curry and a fellow named John, who were both involved in housing co-ops.
Right.
Some student activists. It was this really sort of, it wasn't like mostly from one sector. Food co-ops. We had both 2 board members from City Market and the City Market membership services manager Allison, and Don Jameson of the Vermont Employee Ownership Center. It's like really this group that came from a diversity of places and organizations that was willing to have a frank conversation about what will cross-sector cooperation look like in Vermont. And it was especially interesting. We started with some review of past attempts at creating this sort of thing, and some folks who've been involved in for many years, going back to the 90s, basically gave us some case studies of things that people came together, they put on an event, and then things kind of fizzled out, and then there's another attempt, and so it was really interesting to hear those stories and get grounded in what had come before, and then really dig into what are the needs of the movement, what are the what is being done and who's doing that, and then what is not being done, and like what could be done if we were to form this create this more formalized organization.
Yeah, it was. It was really exciting, and there was one point there where we broke out into a couple groups, and for what stuck out for our group, that was mainly board members and employees of co-ops. I sort of made this observation that we spend a lot of time thinking about our organization, which is perfectly appropriate. If you're at a board meeting, you're thinking about what's relevant to your organization. And similarly, I imagine when there's a board meeting for the Association of Vermont Credit Unions or for Neighboring Food Co-op Association, they're thinking about things that are generally pertinent to them. Again, completely appropriate, but there's this space there to think about the cooperative movement as a whole, and to sort of step out of your organization, your sector, and think about how do we move towards a cooperative economy, and that has to be done very intentionally, and that's one place where I really think this organization could really play a role in driving the cooperative movement forward, in that folks are regularly thinking about how do I connect with the other co-ops in my community. How do we connect with their members? There's a lot of synergies there. And it's really exciting to think about how they could potentially all come together.
Definitely. So we have a few, one of the kind of cool things, and I sort of came to realize afterwards how good of a photographer he is, but Joe Bergeron of the AVCU was running around snapping some photos. And so we have a couple photos to show, just like a little slideshow format, and we'll kind of talk about what was going on in them. And
cool.
And then so this was kind of at the beginning. There's Don Jameson giving an overview. He actually had dug up some documents from really sort of going back to the 90s that were detailed minutes of one of these meetings, and so actually quoting Joe Bergeron and Avram Pat and others who were in the room, a couple decades later.
Right.
And definitely there's a few moments that elicited some laughs, but it was really good to sort of get grounded in that history before sort of thinking about the future. Okay, so then the next one. So this was one of the breakout groups. We sort of we kind of recognized that there were people from multiple different connections of the cooperative movement. So this was the breakout group that was more. We kind of had people whose primary identity was board member or employee, and this was just kind of enthusiastic members, which turned out to be sort of the de facto kind of youth group, the student activists and such nots for the most part, and then Don Tram as well, because Don Tram. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so then we kind of brainstormed, and each group kind of came with different senses of like, what are some of the needs that are not being met in co-ops, and then kind of came back together, reported back to each other. All right, and then you can go to the next one. And then we started, this is Cecile, who is doing a rock star job of facilitating the meeting. You can see behind her there's some many whiteboards and pads that had all this brainstorming stuff. So one of the things that we did was, once we identified the needs, really sort of went into, well, what are some possible initiatives that we as a group could embark on that would serve to help meet those needs.
Right.
So we kind of did some brainstorming. People sort of presented a little bit about what they felt was, what the initiative would be and what its importance would be.
And this was a really participatory process. As you can see on that, the panel to Cecile's right, screen left, there are stars next to different initiatives. So really created this list of initiatives, and then people, sort of said what they were really jazzed about for, doing right away. And the process was very cool. I think that Cecile did a great job of.
Yeah, and it was something where we it wasn't something where we picked a few things and threw everything else out, but it was really kind of saying, okay, what is something that's in our capacity that would really sort of bring this project to like immediate next steps.
Right.
And the three things we really landed at were, the first was forming a steering committee. So we're going to have a group that's going to meet fairly regularly to kind of work on hashing out a structure, doing some research into what that sort of structure could look like and what other groups have done. A second initiative will be sort of doing basically almost like creating a catalog of all of the co-ops and doing a little sort of survey of them in the state, so we can sort of get a sense of, all right, what are all the co-ops? And the third piece is kind of putting together consistently on a monthly basis, doing a kind of combined educational social event to sort of both build the sense of community and also just have this consistent presence as this project progresses. So it's not like a one-off thing, but it's something that's really more of a this, it's sort of a drumbeat. Every month you can expect there to be one of these.
Right.
So if we go to the next slide, just one great picture of Don Christ making a point. This is one of those ones that are just Joe catching a great moment in the meeting. And then the final picture this was at the end. A few people had already moseyed, but then I think it was Neely really rallied people for a picture because that's important to document that. So us at the end of this 4.5 hour process, exhausted but accomplished, and so we really kind of went through a lot. It was I got home and it was just emotionally and physically exhausted from it, but at the same time feeling really, really solid about what we had gotten done.
Yeah, I mean, we spent a significant chunk of time there, but we really accomplished so much that it didn't feel long going through it. It was quite efficient, and I feel like a lot of care was given to making sure that everyone really could provide input into the process. Yet it was still really, really efficient, and I was really psyched about the meeting and the energy that people brought to it, and what came out of it.
Yeah, so I think that there's a fair amount of buy-in, but I think this is a perfect time. So this is Caitlin calling in. Now that we've talked about our experience, we're going to hear about a similar project in Philadelphia. Cool. Hello, Caitlin.
Hi, yes, this is Caitlin. How you doing?
Good. Welcome to the program, and thanks for calling in.
Hey, Caitlin, Eric here. Thanks for calling.
So Caitlin, you're involved in the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance, which is something similar to what we're trying to form up here in Vermont. Can you tell us a little bit about what PACA is?
Yeah, so PACA is a cross-sector cooperative alliance, exactly like it sounds like you're interested in forming. And I would say that sort of the way that's easiest to describe it is that we are part kind of a trade association for cooperatives of all sectors, and then our other goal is to be part cooperative development center, to start new cooperatives in the Philadelphia region.
Awesome. And what's your role within this organization?
I am a member of the steering committee that was formed in November 2012.
Okay. And what kind of structurally, what is PACA like formally organized, or is it a sort of informal coalition? How does it fit together?
So we are formally organized. That was part of the mandate of forming the steering committee, which was formed at a Philadelphia Cooperative Summit, which sounds sort of like the event that you just had recently. So we incorporated as a 501c3, so we're still pending sort of our tax exemption, but in Pennsylvania we are incorporated as a cooperative.
Cool. So I'm really interested to hear a little bit about sort of how that process came about and how folks started to, move towards an alliance of cooperatives.
Yeah. I would say that things started rolling in late 2011, early 2012, coinciding pretty well with the International Year of the Cooperative from the United Nations. We had a social event to kick off the International Year of the Cooperative, and people had been planning a conference for June of 2012, and in the planning stages of that conference, that group of people made a commitment to create a membership organization for area cooperatives that would have a formal board and staff. So since then, that's what we've been moving towards. The conference in June of 2012 was an academic conference comparing cooperatives in the Philadelphia area with cooperatives in Madison, Wisconsin. And then later in that year, we had this summit, which was about 80 people from only our area talking about what should a co-op alliance do, what they were looking for, what kind of services. And from that, we had a new steering committee, and that steering committee was tasked with incorporating, creating bylaws, setting up the structure of the organization, and getting members.
Interesting. So, once you guys kind of came together, were there any particular sectors of the cooperative movement that were like more, or that have been sort of more involved or less involved? What's the sort of composition of this coalition been?
I would say that it's been pretty heavy on food co-ops. Philadelphia area is, I would say, pretty unique in that we have now 4 food co-ops that are all totally different and independent. And we have many more startup food co-ops in the works all around the Philadelphia area. I would say that it was mostly driven by food co-ops, but we also have the energy co-op in Philadelphia has been very active and supportive in a lot of different ways, and then some participation from housing co-ops and credit unions as well.
Mm-hmm. And is there, what does the worker co-op piece of that look like? Are there many worker co-ops in the area? Are they organized sort of separately? How does that fit in?
We do have 2 main worker co-ops in our area, and they have been generally supportive, and when we work with them, they're very helpful, but they have not been super, they haven't participated as much in the organizational development of the Co-op Alliance, but they are, both of them are members now, and they are, on board, but just haven't been participating as much with the structure and bylaws and things like that.
One really interesting thing that struck me out of our meeting yesterday is that there were really some sort of folks around Vermont that have a lot of experience in co-ops that have sort of thought about this before, and this was... but it hadn't been really, it hadn't moved forward, and they were very excited to sort of explore the potential for this to move forward again. I was wondering if there was a similar dynamic, down in Philadelphia where this is maybe something that people had thought about before and it didn't quite get off the ground.
Well, we do have an interesting history in Philadelphia, and fairly recent, in that we had the Philadelphia PACE. Let me see what it was. It was called Philadelphia Association of Cooperative Enterprise, and that was in the 70s and 80s, and that was a very strong organization that tended to do a lot of ESOP conversions, and they worked on creating when area A&P grocery stores were closing, they worked on converting them to be owned by the employees. So that's an interesting bit of history that we have in our recent past, but not within the last, 2 decades. I personally am not familiar with whether there were attempts at cross-sector co-op organizing in that interim time. One of the projects that we've been working on is a compiling of our region's history of cooperative businesses, but I don't recall finding anything about cross-sector organizing initiatives that happened since PACE ended.
One thing in terms of those previous attempts in Vermont that seemed to be a pattern was oftentimes it would be around kind of trying to put on a single event or initiative, and then once that energy was expended, it sort of petered out. What do you see as kind of in terms of what you guys have been doing with PACA that's given it the sort of staying power and the momentum to sort of continue going without sort of losing that?
I think that 2012 definitely was buoyed by all of the attention paid to cooperatives because of the United Nations. At the very beginning of 2012, our Philadelphia City Council passed a resolution about the importance of cooperatives. There was a lot of buzz happening, and I think that now a lot of our momentum comes from just the increasing excitement about cooperative businesses as a model. There are so many startups forming in the area, and all of those people sort of coming on board and learning more about cooperatives is fueling our interest and the need to have a cross-sector co-op alliance. I think our steering committee has been in it for the long haul already and have accomplished a lot of pretty great things, and we are entering kind of a new stage now where we're hoping to have an executive director soon. So that'll be a very different thing to transition from an all-volunteer steering committee to an organization with staff. And also coming up this spring will be our first official board elections. We already have members, but we don't have an official board yet. So those are a lot of formal steps that are coming up soon that will kind of hand off the baton or change the current group's energy or shake it up a little bit so that we have going into a new phase.
Nice.
Caitlin, you spoke before about PACA sort of having dual roles as a trade association and as sort of a cooperative development, playing a role in cooperative development as well. What kind of initiatives is PACA involved in? How do those roles look like?
I would say with the cooperative development right now, we're doing a lot of us individually, members of the steering committee, are working with startup co-ops or individual existing co-ops with services or functions that a cooperative development center would provide. We're a little unclear at this moment on whether we're doing it as individual co-op developers or as representatives of PACA. But providing services like helping with incorporation or bylaws and things like that. As far as trade association or kind of a chamber of commerce for cooperatives, we've been trying to bridge the gap of having very little capacity to do things because we're an all-volunteer organization, and also trying to provide services and benefits for our members who have signed up already, and they are supportive of us, but it's still, we are a trade association, so we're exploring things like possible shared services. The cost of healthcare is increasing very dramatically for a lot of the co-ops in our area, and we're looking at whether we can do something about that. We're also interested in doing things like a cooperative loan fund. A little bit of that has happened informally, but we could be kind of a home for that. And that's, I think, the way that a lot of us think of ourselves, that we can be sort of a hub for initiatives that individual co-ops would be unlikely to take on, but we as kind of an umbrella organization hopefully will have tax exemption and can be able to take, help them apply for grants and things like that. So I would say that's a little bit what we're trying to do in both of those arenas.
So one thing you mentioned there was the members of PACA. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of what it means to be a member, and like how does that feed into the governance of the organization?
It feeds pretty directly into the governance of the organization. We had a subcommittee of our steering committee working just on setting up the bylaws, deciding how membership works, how election works, how member dues work, and those all took a lot of debate and a lot of time to figure out, but I think we're pretty pleased with how they ended up. We currently have 7 members that reflect all different co-op sectors, and right now the benefits of being a member of PACA are a lot about access to our Philadelphia-specific Co-op 101 training, supporting the co-ops in finding financing, connecting them to national networks, connecting them to each other, which is at the very base. One of our goals is to build bridges between the different sectors that otherwise aren't doing a lot of interaction, that the credit unions want to help grow the cooperative movement with financing, and they have the ability to do that. So we've been kind of individually building those bridges and making those connections, and that's, I would say, one of our biggest perks of being a member right now.
So one tension that I think exists within our current organizing here in Vermont that I'm sort of curious to hear what if it is reflected in the experience in Philadelphia, but is that when trying to build something that's kind of a co-op movement organization, you have like people whose primary identity or roles are different. So there's some folks who are just enthusiastic members who are activists, and other people for whom are they're a manager, or they work their profession is in the co-op movement, and sort of creating a space in which the kind of energy and kind of skills and expertise and activities of both can be empowered is something that I've been giving a lot of thought to. I was wondering, like, with PACA, like, what is the kind of have you guys sort of given any thought to the role of the of kind of rank and file members who want to get involved with the co-op movement versus the role of people who are staff people or board members in the organization?
Certainly, and I would say that most of the people who are on the steering committee are kind of rank and file co-op members. There's certainly people who are on boards of some of the co-ops, but I would say most of us come to the steering committee just as members of co-ops. And we are trying to involve staff as well, but I think that as we've been growing and establishing our structure, we're trying to engage people more socially, more building awareness. We need volunteer help with organizing different events, so we've definitely involved people in that way. Excuse me. And as we go forward, I think especially having a staff member or more than one staff member will be able to get people involved on a more consistent basis. Some of our subcommittees have members who are not on the steering committee, so they kind of just come in for special tasks or purposes based on their skills. We also are launching a new member recruitment campaign and fundraising campaign, and I think we're going to be reaching out to some other folks in the cooperative movement here who can help us launch that, who are not currently on the steering committee.
On the cooperative development side of things, have you experienced many folks coming and really being interested in how they could sort of conduct the business that they want to start up as a cooperative, or what has the interest been like on that end?
There's a lot of interest, and as I said earlier, PACA is not yet saying we are a cooperative development center because we don't currently have the capacity as PACA to do that. But on an individual basis, many of the members of PACA are advising and facilitating and structuring co-ops. Another member of the steering committee, Peter Frank, have been working kind of as developers and kind of as possible members of a brewery co-op incubator idea. So there have been some meetings happening about that, and actually I think we may be losing one of our members to Vermont soon, so you should find him when he gets there.
Definitely.
And we are, there's a lot of different sectors that the co-op model is kind of sparking interest in our area. I've been working on very preliminary stages with a group of construction workers who are kind of tired of working on their own and competing with each other and want to join together to get the benefits of being in a group and being in a co-op. So it's really exciting for me when groups kind of identify that the cooperative model serves their needs and then decide to go with that. So we're almost a cooperative development center, but quite yet.
So one other thing you mentioned earlier was the social events and social aspect of this organizing, and I think it was from PACA that we got the idea to do our first co-op happy hour. And one of the big takeaways from the meeting yesterday was that we're going to try to have consistently on a monthly basis a educational and social event. Can you talk a little bit about sort of maybe the role that the social side of things has played in your organizing process and some of the things that you guys have done and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the social aspect is incredibly important, and your promise to do a monthly event is a great idea, and I wish that we were doing monthly events. We have done a lot of social things, and I would say a lot of them have been kind of bigger affairs, and it would be a good thing for us to do more low-key and more frequent kind of happy hour things. We in Philadelphia last July were host to the Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy, the big conference in 2012. So there have been a lot of very large events, and I think that smaller things are a good idea, and seeing each other is the way that you build trust and community and movements. We do have a co-op happy hour coming up at the end of February, at which I'm giving a little talk about a trip I took to Mondragon, which was very exciting. So I'll be telling people a little bit about that. But I think that I could not overemphasize the importance of social, and the fact that you are already doing a weekly hour-long video about co-ops to raise the awareness of co-ops is a great start. We would be extremely impressed with ourselves if we could do something like that. So that's very admirable, and we've been trying to do that a bit with our website, which is philadelphia.coop, our Facebook page, our blog, to just keep the conversation going.
And again, as we sort of think about this, as we're embarking on this big next step, were there any kind of stumbling blocks that you guys ran into that you feel like are worth noting, or sort of things that were more challenging than you expected, or anything like that?
I'm thinking mostly of legal things that it took a lot of time and wordsmithing to get things like the Articles of Incorporation and bylaws and 501c3 application right and ready. And I mostly did not work on that. That was a different subcommittees that worked on that and spent a lot of hours doing that. And since the process also relies on getting lawyer consultation and sending things in, and you don't want to waste time or money on that. So getting the funding together to make those different applications and getting the agreements on what the structure was in order to then write that into the bylaws. It's a complicated process because it's cross-sector, and you can say, oh, dues are based on revenue, but then housing co-ops don't really have revenue like a business necessarily. So there's just a lot of nuance that happens because it's cross-sector, and you can't say, well, all of our members are going to be like this or have this characteristic, which is the right kind of challenge, I think, because that's the point of what we're doing. But it just takes time and takes patience, and sustaining the volunteer work over time can be tiring, but it's exciting for us now that kind of the goal is in sight, and we've accomplished the things that we set out to do, which is great, and I'm really proud of us for doing that.
We're really excited to see it happen as well, and in other places like Austin too. It's really exciting to see this energy around cooperatives. As you guys look sort of to the future, what is PACA really excited about?
We've always had some pretty big dreams. We want to, as I mentioned, have a co-op loan fund for the region so we can have more money available to startups and to expansions and lines of credit, because that's been difficult for some co-ops in our area. We've been talking on and off about forming a university center for the study of cooperatives, because most of the academic study or research on cooperatives comes out of agriculture programs, and we think there's kind of a niche there for urban co-ops. And another thing that we've been doing, we've been working with a congressman who is my congressman, Chaka Fatah. He has introduced 2 different bills that ask for more funding for cooperative development and particularly for urban areas. The first one kind of died in committee, and it's possible that this one will too, but public policy is something that we're working more on, and trying to get funding, economic development, just making the case that co-ops make sense as economic and community development.
Yeah, and then so the one other thing that before we run out of time, we've only got a few minutes left, but the one other thing, just sort of, you mentioned a little bit about sort of a dues structure. What in terms of thinking about how if as you move from an all volunteer organization to an organization with paid staff that's a little more professionalized, like what does that funding piece look like?
The funding piece looks like, basically we spent a long time trying to match the member dues with our budget, and then the member dues just ended up being way too high, and we ended up with, oh, sure, like all 80 credit unions in the area will sign on, but that's not going to happen initially, I don't think. So we basically want co-ops in the area to be members, to be dues-paying members, but we don't want it to be prohibitive. So we're looking at other ways to close kind of the budget gap there. If we get our 501c3 tax exemption, we'll be able to get a little bit more foundation funding for specific projects and things like that. Currently, we have a fiscal sponsor, Resources for Human Development, and they are a 501c3. So any donations to us now are tax deductible, and they also gave us a $10,000 matching grant. So that has helped us with our initial kind of member drive and fundraising campaign, and we're definitely going to be asking for member dues and individual members to sign on pretty soon. But it's hard in an urban area, I would say, to get the funding to do what we're trying to do. But we're working on it.
Well, I think we're just about out of time, but thank you so much for calling in and sharing your experiences. Any final thoughts you feel like would be pertinent to share before we sign off?
I wish you all luck up there. It sounds like you already have a lot going on that is going in a good direction, and I'm really excited to hear more about where it goes. You all are welcome to come on down here and see how it's working. Solidarity NYC is coming down next weekend, and we're going to show them what we're doing. So come down anytime.
Well, on my upcoming train trip, my train will go through Philadelphia, so I might think about stopping in.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for sharing, Caitlin. Really appreciate you talking about your experiences. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
All right. So again, that was Caitlin Quigley, who is part of the sort of on the steering committee of the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance, and I think it would be good, and we've heard their experience. Maybe for a future episode, dig in a little bit to see if we could find someone from the Austin project, and maybe from a cooperative council, like maybe the Kansas Cooperative Council. I think it would be good to collect a few different people's thoughts on the experience of these different places as we start to think about charting our own future.
Absolutely, I completely agree. It was really informative to hear about Caitlin's experience in Philadelphia, though. It's excellent.
Yeah, so I think we'll be doing another one of these shows in 2 weeks, and and in the meantime, there's going to be some emails going out around getting the steering committee going for this Cooperative Vermont, whatever it turns into, and specifically about also trying to get the first of these social events organized, hopefully for February. So definitely keep your eye on our Facebook page for an event. I think the idea is to kind of be touring around the state. So specifically, we've, again, as a volunteer group, and we're both based in the Burlington area, things have tended to center around here. But now that we've got cast this wider net, hopefully we'll be able to have some events in southern Vermont and really sort of start bringing more people into this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the other piece will be as the steering committee sort of does its work on getting together a proposal for an organization, really putting the word out. So if there's anyone out there who's interested in sort of commenting on drafts or being part of the process of really sort of figuring out what this organization is going to be, we want as many people to participate as possible and sort of give their perspective. That will just make it a stronger document and stronger organization.
I think there was a great group of people present yesterday, really some key folks, but there was also a realization that we need to do a lot of outreach to make sure that whatever form Cooperative Vermont takes, it's representative of the larger cooperative movement. So yeah, please, any feedback, input, we'd love to. We're completely open to it.
Yep. So again, if you want to get involved, the easiest place to find us, where we probably put out most stuff, is on our Facebook page. Just search for Cooperative Vermont. You can also go on YouTube to find, if you came in late, to find a copy of this episode that should be posted relatively shortly, and probably snip out a few pieces as well as past episodes and other videos that we've shot in community events and such not. And we've also got I'll post something on the Facebook page. We've got a newsletter that goes out we usually put it out every month or two through MailChimp. So if you want to sign up for that newsletter, you can check it out. And we won't spam your inbox. We'll get you good information. But until next episode, you've been watching Cooperative Vermont. I'm Matt Kropp.
And I'm Eric Gibbs.
Good night.